Well, let's think about that together for a second. There was a time when there were a lot of moderates in the House and the Senate. I was a conservative Democrat. There were a group of moderate Republicans. We worked constantly together in the Reagan administration to support many of the things that President Reagan accomplished in that incredible time he served. And that continued for quite a while until the ranks were decimated. I posted the other day the fact that 46% of Americans consider themselves moderate, and yet they have so little representation now in the House and the Senate. And for the most part, you've even seen those who represent the two parties in our country really fall in the more extreme side of the right and the left than ever before. Part of that is because we've really rigged the elections, I think, in redistricting around the country. We've really resegregated the country when you think about it. We have these super black majority districts now and super white conservative districts, and they can't even talk to each other anymore. We changed our politics. It used to be you could run, and raise your own income, raise your own money to run your race from the friends you have back in your home district. Today, you've seen the politics of these races where millions and millions flow in from all over the country, and these horrible ads are run that literally create so much hostility and anger among not just the people of our country, but the candidates themselves. When you get elected now, you don't go to Washington to get along. You go to get even with those horrible, evil people on the other side who treated you so badly in your race. When you get to Washington, the parties really control what happens in the House and the Senate now. There are few people who can moderate between the two parties anymore, and you pretty much have to follow party discipline. You'll see that eventually in the way these votes turn out pretty soon on healthcare. And finally, we desocialized the Congress. There was a lot of time when I was there spent getting to know one another. We'd have lunches together, travel together. Our kids grew up in the same schools and went to the same churches, and we knew each other's spouses. And the result was that you could have a disagreement, but you didn't have to be disagreeable about it. You could get along. You could leave the Congress after a heavy debate and still be friends and have a drink together, or go to an event together. That's all gone today. 114 members are actually sleeping in their offices today because they don't want to bring their families to Washington. When you put it all together, Steve and Jim, what we have is a situation in Washington where we've empowered the parties, disempowered the moderates and independents so that they have little chance to get elected anymore. And we have a situation where people go to Washington really angry, and they stay angry at each other, never get to know each other the way we used to do. I've got a very simple theory about politics. It's about people. And we all put our pants on, our dress on the same way. We're all the same people. And whether I agree with you or not, we ought to be able to work together for the good of our country. That's all gone now. It's all about politics. It's all about the parties. And it's all about getting even and winning instead of really, succeeding for good national causes. It's a real shame. We can change that, I think. There are ways to change it, and I'm going to write about it and offer Congress a whole bunch of solutions. How we can't go back to good old days, but we can certainly get back to normal where we started working together. That's it in a nutshell, but there's a lot more to it, obviously.
Billy, let me ask you this, but money-wise, I know that with the Citizens United Supreme Court case, there's a limited amount you can do. I've had several lawyers tell me this is this kind of radical solution, but although you can't prohibit people from giving you money through PACs and through various associations, there is restrictions on where the money comes from. For example, you can't give money outside. A foreign national cannot contribute to a member of Congress. And I've had several lawyers tell me that this might work, that you could only accept contributions within the district from which you run. If you're going to run for governor of Louisiana, you can't accept unlimited money under the rules in the state, but outside the state, you'd be prohibited at the state line. If you're running for Congress, you can only get money from within your congressional district. And I had two constitutional lawyers saying that might apply. That's a radical an idea. What do you think? You could only accept...
It would be a good idea if it were constitutional. I have serious questions about whether the Supreme Court would say that it's not a violation of free speech to prohibit someone who lives across the state line from engaging in elections anywhere else in the country. So here's the problem, Jim. What we've done basically in the election laws is empowered the parties to raise unlimited right now. They can raise what's called soft money from anybody in huge chunks. And we've really limited the ability of the individual candidate to raise money. So that more and more candidates are now depending upon the party money and outside interest money to win elections, because we've really cut off their sources locally of raising money. It makes it harder and harder for a candidate to self-finance. I'm going to tell you a secret. I don't tell anybody. In all of the 25 years I served in Washington, the parties contributed a total of $2,000 to me, and I gave it back to them. I ran strictly on resources we raised from friends and mostly from back home. And it gave me the chance to be independent. And I was loyal to my parties whenever I belonged to one or the other. But I was also independent enough to make separate decisions on the basis of whether or not my constituents felt one way or another, or whether they wanted me to vote one way. When I was a young freshman, for example, my freshman class who had just elected me to be their representative on the leadership in the Democratic Party, they were so upset with me for voting with the Reagan budget the first year that they went to the Speaker, Tip O'Neill, and demanded that I be removed from that position. He threw him out of his office. He said, "Get out of here. Billy owes his vote to the people of Louisiana, not to me, not to the party, not to you." And he basically threw him out. That's how things used to be. Today, the Speaker of the House would have removed me in a New York second. That's the way it works today. It's all party control.
Isn't that amazing, Jim?
Yeah.
Really? Go ahead.
We don't have a lot of time. I know you're very, very busy, but what about health care? You were telling us off the air that you've been in touch with several senators. You've been in the health care arena, dealing with various prescription drugs. Is there any chance of this Republican legislation that right now has a huge uphill fight in the Senate has a chance of passing, number one? And number two, is it draconian, as a lot of people are saying, with 22 million people losing their health care coverage? Rates going to take a huge rate. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. You've heard all that routine. What's your honest appraisal of the present bill that the Senate is considering now?
Well, I'll start with the fact that we're not comparing the present bill to a good current law. The 11 million people now getting subsidized under Obamacare are ending up in more and more states with a single choice, as insurance companies are pulling out. It's a failed system. It requires people to buy insurance that they don't want and they can't afford in too many cases. When you make young people buy chronic care coverage, that's crazy. They don't have a need for that. And when you make older couples carry maternity insurance, that's kind of nutty. 78-year-old guy told me he had to buy a policy with maternity insurance, even though his wife is, well past time to have children. It's a crazy deal that just doesn't work. And the result is that while it may have provided temporarily some people with insurance, they're not going to be able to keep it. It's falling apart. What the Senate bill does is complete that process. It takes away the nearly $1 trillion of money that is being taxed right now on the healthcare system, that we're all paying, by the way, when you buy insurance. All those taxes on medical devices, all those taxes they're collecting on policies, all end up being paid by somebody who bought a policy or has a medical event. It repeals those taxes, and when that happens, it automatically calls for you to replace it with something. How do you provide for Americans to be able to afford insurance? We've got Medicare and Medicaid for the elderly and the poor, but the people in between are the ones we're talking about. How do you make insurance and healthcare more affordable? The natural answer that the Senate bill reaches for is something that works so beautifully in America and has made us such an exceptional country. It's called competition. It literally opens the door to begin giving consumers a chance to pick the policy that works for them instead of the one the government wrote for them. When we wrote Part D, the plan to give seniors a chance to get coverage for their medicines, we did it with a competitive model. What we did was we set up a plan whereby different insurance companies would offer different plans to seniors. The seniors would look at their medical needs and pick the plan that covered the medicines that doctor required them to take. I remember I changed my mother's plan 3 times when she was alive to make sure that the plan covered the medicine she wanted. Right now, those plans cover 4,800 different medicines, where VA only covers 1,400. It is literally wide open competition. It saved the government over $500 billion. Seniors are saving $2,200 a year at least per year per senior. It's got a 94% approval rating because it's built on competition and choice. It's giving people a chance to buy what they need instead of what the government says they have to have. And when you start mandating people to buy policies that they can't afford and they don't need, you get what we got right now, a failed Obamacare system. So what the Senate wants to do is begin unraveling that and creating, hopefully, more and more competition in the insurance markets. Now, they can't do it all in this bill. This is very important, guys. If they could do it all in this bill, it would require 60 votes. They're doing what they can under the restrictions of their own rules. They have to keep it within budget items. Once they finish this, if they can finish it, the next step will be to eliminate the state barriers to interstate and national competition for the insurance industries and for consumers to choose much better choices for themselves. Well, let me give you one little example that when I try to explain to people what's wrong with the current system. Say, hey, when you buy auto insurance, you don't buy coverage to cover your spark plugs and your tires and your oil changes. You get comprehensive coverage to cover you when you have an accident. Young people, that's all they need. They don't need chronic care coverage to cover everything in the world, including everything the government says you have to cover. They need coverage for something that happens to them catastrophically. Older people like you and I, we need coverage for chronic care. We have all kinds of chronic conditions. And when you start offering competition instead of government mandates, you end up with policies that make sense for people instead of policies that make no sense. When they make no sense, people choose not to buy them, and that's why Obamacare is failing. So what the Senate hopes to do is open the door to more competition. Let me tell you where they are right now. They just had a meeting in the White House. I met last night with Senator Heller from Nebraska, one of the holdouts. He and some others want more help for Medicaid. They don't want the states to suffer any losses in their Medicaid systems, particularly those that expanded the way Louisiana did. The other group on the other side want more assurances that, Obamacare has really gone away. They want more provisions to say that whole old system is gone before they put in a new system. How they get to the 50 votes they need is they're going to have to give some to both sides without offending either side. That's a trick. I used to do it all the time as chairman of my committee, keeping the center together while you help those on the edges come with you. I think there's a fair chance they're going to get it done in the Senate. The problem is going to come when it goes back to the House, because the concessions they're going to have to make in the Senate will be hard for a lot of those Freedom Caucus members in the House to take. That's sort of it in a nutshell, guys.